If I'm understanding this correctly then, so Quentin didn't want to meet with you until the film was finished?
Oh yeah. No, so part of that conversation with him and giving his blessing was that, yeah, he made it very clear that he did not want to meet me. And I was like, oh, I was kind of crushed. I was like, maybe I thought I could use him as a reference or actually to check things with him to make sure that I was doing things correctly. And he's like, no. Nope, we'll meet afterwards.
That's interesting.
And he's 100% right, of course, because he understands all aspects of filmmaking, including if he was part of it, it could be viewed as bias, right? And it would have been, especially after the things that have come down during making the film. So he was absolutely right to not be involved. Thanks, Quentin. Yeah.
And you started filming the first interview when? What year was this?
I think it was late 2015.
Okay. So different things have happened since then, different news items. What was your feeling on including some things or maybe not including some things in the film?
While we were making the film, we had a few more interviews to go. And the Weinstein Company approached us to buy the film. And ultimately, we ended up doing that deal, mainly because I was like, well, this guy has been Quentin's partner through all of his films to date, from Reservoir Dogs through at that time was Hateful Eight. So it seemed to make sense, and we were going to finish it together. And then things went terribly wrong. Obviously outside of anybody's control, except his, maybe. But October 5th, right, the New York Times article dropped. And
where were you that day? Sorry to interrupt.
I was still laying in bed, and I was up, and I was going through the news, and I saw that, and we were already a little bit at odds, just because of them being who they are and how they do business. So it was very aggressive, So we were already kind of having a hard time. So when this happened, and knowing the past and being a woman, when this came to light, I was like, oh yes, oh no, my film. Like, now what? So it was a year-long battle to get the film back and get the rights back. And it was definitely very difficult for the film and for the nuts and bolts of that.
Sure.
And as a woman, it was a really it was very lonely because nobody wanted to help once that happened. It got very quiet.
Sure.
So, and I feel that's true for women on the personal side. So there was a lot of crossovers personally and business-wise, where it was very like, wow, like the feelings that go along with that. I know I'm being vague, and I kind of apologize for that, but
it's understandable. It's fine.
It was a very difficult, dark, lonely year. But fighting for the film, especially after doing most of the interviews at that time and learning about Quentin and learning about him and how he feels about social issues and women in general, I was like, I have to fight for this film. I have to, or else it's just going to fall into the abyss. I don't even know how many other films are still caught up, and filmmakers. Like, it's not, most of them have not gotten their films back. So I fought very hard. It was a very hard battle, but ultimately we won, so it's a great story, yay. And then we had to revisit how we're going to end the film, because we had interviewed with Bob Weinstein. Harvey was supposed to be involved. Harvey was always part of the conversation because it was Harvey and Quentin, and we're talking about his filmography. Of course you talk about Harvey and his participation in that. Harvey was the one who took a chance on Quentin. So that's very much a part of the story, and now that changed. Right. Well, now the story had to change, and Quentin now is out with regard to that. Right. That partnership was done, so we had to address it, and I hope I took care of. I tried to present it without side, like this is what happened, and then we move on. So there was a lot of decisions from what started out as this amazing, I got this great project and everybody's supportive and everybody's showing up. You know, Sam Jackson shows up and he's like, I called Quinn, he said to show up. Awesome. You know, to all of this horrible stuff happening. And now we're back, right? So now we're up and we're going and we're going to finish the film. And again, now you're like, okay, what do I do with this, right? And you figure it out, and hopefully it's well done.
And it had been in all the trades that the Weinstein Company had picked up the film, correct?
Yes.
So
it was everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal
Yeah.
for because it was a Tarantino doc and his association with Quentin, but then all these other filmmakers that are caught up in the same issue on the business side, right? And then again, the whole other conversation, which overlaps for Quentin and Uma had issue, Rose McGowan, Mira Sorvino, who, was Quentin's girlfriend back then. Pieces of that had come out. It was crazy. It was crazy. And as much as you try to separate it, it's very entwined for everybody, personally and business-wise. So.
And it set off basically this new Me Too movement, essentially, of many people coming forward, and not just women, but men as well. And so now it
Thankfully.
has a whole new conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with talking about because you decided to pull the film from them, or do you not? If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to.
No, sure.
Okay. When you decided to pull the film and look for a new distributor, what was the reaction from people in the industry?
So when I did get the film back, there were definitely mixed responses when I went back into the marketplace to find another distributor. Ultimately, I decided to partner with Entertainment Squad, who's Shaked Berenson, who came from Epic Pictures. We partnered and we're putting it out. So eventually I was like, I'm done with these conversations, because there was definitely a lot of fear, especially since I included the conversation. So when I re-entered the marketplace with it, it was very mixed. Some people were like, well, why don't you pull that out? Why don't you just not have that conversation in the documentary? Because what does that really have to do with Quentin's filmography? I had a really hard time being like, oh, that totally makes sense. I should take that out. It just didn't make sense. So I was like, I'm gonna do what I feel is the truth.
Sure.
And present that, and we went a different way with the distribution, which is really exciting. So.
Right. It's just interesting because I've known a few other documentary filmmakers who were in the middle of a film and a scandal broke, and for them not to put it in the film would just be like, I get not totally focusing on it, having it at the main crux of the movie, but it just wouldn't work. Like, they would be so severely criticized for not at least saying something.
Right. So then there's that.
Right.
So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So I was like, well, here it is, and you do what you want with it. That's how I feel it comes across in the documentary. This is what happened. Feel however you want about, and that's been very mixed too. The reaction from women obviously is, wow, that's really great that that's in there. But then there's the next step. I didn't know Quentin was such a women's advocate. I didn't realize that his characters were written from this feeling rather than what he's accused of or being abusive with his actresses or his characters or what have you. So I hope that women revisit Quentin's filmography with a different eye. I know, well, I was always there, I think. But, a lot of women have been turned off by, the blood and the violence and the this and that. But if you, again, with all of that stuff, when you understand where all of that is coming from with Quentin, it's not, as Sam Jackson says, to scratch his nails on the blackboard. He doesn't do that. It all comes from it's a much deeper place. And I think women should revisit. I think they'll really dig some of these characters. I mean, Uma's character in Kill Bill, whichever, the bride, Beatrix, whichever name you want to choose to call her, but the bride story is amazing. She was raped, her child was taken from her, she's got all these issues going on, and she's like, I'm gonna get rid of those people. So he takes it to an extreme, but he takes that emotion to an extreme. And it's a great ride, but it's much more meaningful. It shouldn't be written off. Women need to revisit and really look at them.
Any advice for filmmakers who are in the middle of a film or even at the tail end of one, filming, whatever, editing, and something newsworthy happens and their choice and how they're going to be criticized either way?
I wrestled for months with it, like literally sat down and stopped editing. I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I went back and forth because you have your own opinions. And wait, my advice would be to wait until you realize that you're not inputting your opinion and you're just presenting. And it should be included. Possibly. I mean, it's obviously case by case, but if it's something that's, like in this case, that's so important to that story and Quentin's filmography, here specifically, it does apply to include it. But I had to wait until it was clear, right? So I didn't want to present my opinion of it. That would have been a very different documentary and would have skewed it. So as a documentarian, you really have to make sure that your mindset has settled and you're delivering it as it is.
Yeah, one of the filmmakers that I talked to that encountered a very big scandal and was in the middle of their film, they used headlines to show, because they couldn't not.
I used headlines, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And that was a way to just show that this was not it was not your opinion, it was what was out there in the public knowledge.
Yeah. And then you gotta be careful which headlines you choose too. The way they're written. Are you throwing this in people's faces, or are you make sure it's, again, this is just me. I want to make sure that it was, when somebody said something and that's the headline, that's what they said, right? Now I guess I'm jumping into fake news out there. Yeah, be careful not to pick the fake news.
Right.
But I guess that's true, That's tough. It was really hard. That was a very, very difficult decision. And then making the decision, how do you tell it? Right? I chose not to have like a voiceover, like it's all the actors speaking. There's no voiceover in the film. So we chose Michael Madsen's telling of what happened to go over that montage. Right? And we used footage that we've seen before from Quentin's films under it, so that you're looking at the same thing differently, right? So with regards to that story, specifically again with Harvey and Quentin, well, this was going on at the same time that these were going on.
Like a timeline.
Right? Mm-hmm. So then there's that. Then there's the device you use to tell the story.